Hi everyone, it's me Anna. Welcome to today's video, and today I want to talk about all the books I read in May. I read 6 books in May, almost 7, but one of them was a DNF. I am going to talk about the book I DNF'd, so we have 7 books to talk about today. I want to say that May was an incredible reading month overall, but there were a couple of reads that weren't my favorite, to be honest, excluding the one I DNF'd. So it was a good month, but there were a couple of really boring books, unfortunately. Books that I didn't enjoy. But let's just jump into our May reads. And the first book I read in May was Pet Sematary, one of my most anticipated reads of 2026. I want to say I really wanted to read this book so bad, and actually when I bought it, I was going to include it in my book haul video. So at first I wasn't going to read it until I updated my physical TBR. But when I got my hands on this book, I realized that I just couldn't wait any longer. In this book, we follow a family that's moved into a new house, and there's this path behind their house that leads to a pet cemetery. One of the kids gets really curious about this pet cemetery, but then one of our main characters finds out that there's actually another burial ground beyond the pet cemetery, and then he discovers some disturbing as well as intriguing things about that burial ground. The first thing that I want to say is that I should stop expecting anything from Stephen King books. I tend to expect certain things from his books after reading the premises usually, and then those books just turned out to be something completely different. So it was the case with this book too, but it wasn't a bad thing by any means. While it wasn't what I expected, and while the plot went in a direction I didn't think it would, it didn't hinder my experience. I still really enjoyed the book more than I thought after I realized that it wasn't about animals and it wasn't about that pet cemetery. So I really enjoyed the direction the story went in, even though I expected something different. In my opinion, this book isn't really about animals, and it's not really about that pet cemetery, but rather about that place that our main character discovers a little bit later. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm not going to tell you what that place is and what it does and why that place is so crucial in this story. Mostly, of course, it's about our characters. It's about grief. It shows you what people can be capable of when they're grieving. The characters were so compelling, this family. I was really so invested in their personal struggles, in their relationship and their problems and their secrets and their happy moments and their worst moments. I think maybe not much happened at the beginning of the book, but I enjoyed every single page. I enjoyed every single chapter because of the characters and because of how compelling they were. I think there were some pacing issues maybe. I wanted it to be just slightly faster, I think, at the very end of the book. Almost at the very end. I also couldn't really understand the point of what that evil force was doing. There is, this evil force, obviously, almost in every Stephen King book. So that's not really a spoiler because you still don't know what it does if you haven't read the book. And I did understand some things, like the meaning, right? And the point of what it was doing, what it benefited from. I still had some questions, but I rated it 4.75. Honestly, I rated it 5 stars at first. I thought about it a little bit, and then I decided to rate it 4.75, which is still a very high rating. Also, I absolutely loved the ending. The last scene of the book, it was so disturbing, but it was so good. I think it's a good ending for a book, if you know what I mean. Like, there are some really horrible things happening at the end. I'm not denying that, but the very last scene of the book was just so good, in my opinion. There was Pet Sematary. I liked it. It wasn't what I expected, but I really, really enjoyed it. My next May read was The Night Circus. I was so intrigued by this book. I was expecting an incredibly atmospheric story, and I was expecting something mysterious and magical. This book is all those things. It has magic, lots and lots and lots of magic. It has vibes, but it was such a boring read. And I don't understand why, because I don't mind all vibes books. I actually like books that are all vibes and no plot. But in this one, the vibes just weren't enough for me. I just constantly found myself so incredibly bored. The vibes were immaculate. Like, if you want a book that is all vibes, this might be a good read for you. The ending was bittersweet, but again, it didn't really get to me because I just, didn't enjoy the book overall. And yeah, I would have enjoyed the ending way more if I hadn't been so bored. I really wanted to be immersed in these vibes and this story, but I wasn't. I wanted to DNF this book actually, but I didn't hate it that much, And I can't say that I regret not DNFing it. I wanted to see how it would end, and I did see how it ended. So yeah, that's The Night Circus. So after The Night Circus, I needed something really fast-paced. I needed something action heavy and plot heavy, and so I picked up Hellbent, which is the sequel to Ninth House. So this is the second book in the trilogy. The third book comes out very soon, and I'm looking forward to it. I think Ninth House was a little bit too confusing for me, and while I still enjoyed it, it was a 4-star read. This one I rated 4.75. I was thinking between like 4.5 and 4.75, but I decided to settle on 4.75. There were a lot of historical references in this book, but they didn't make anything seem too confusing. I actually enjoyed it. It was all well delivered. In the first book, our main character gets in trouble because of all the things she's been dealing with, all the people she's been dealing with as well. And then she's reached out by a man who offers her a new life, who offers her a scholarship at a university, and in return she has to become one of these people who supervise the secret societies. The reason why she's reached out by him in the first place is because she can see ghosts, and so she's exactly the type of person that these people dealing with those secret societies have been looking for. In the first book, one of our main characters disappears into another dimension, I guess, and so in this book she tries to save that person, bring them back. This was a real page turner. There were so many things that caught me off guard. Also, there was a point in the story where we were shown some glimpses of our main characters' lives. That part of the story was split into their individual POVs, and so I didn't really care about some of those characters. It's not that I didn't care about the characters themselves, but I didn't really care about their worst moments in life, because we were shown exactly that. Yeah, I didn't really care, and I just think that some of the PVs were a little too long, and that was the only moment in the book that made me put it down. I think I would have enjoyed it more if the PVs had been shorter. And there was a murder investigation in this book as well as in the first one, but in this book, when we finally reached the conclusion, it felt like all our efforts were in vain, kind of, which I'm usually okay with. I just thought, why did we do all these things to just find out that they were pretty much in vain? But apart from that, everything was perfect. It was super entertaining. It was very fast-paced. A crazy, crazy, crazy book. Truly, in the best way possible. I really loved it so much. It was very funny too, and risky, and just insane. So I'm looking forward to the next book, and I enjoyed this so much more than Ninth House. The next book was A Dark and Drowning Tide, and this little bookmark tells us the fact that I DNF'd this book. This is a sapphic fantasy filled with folklore, where we follow a group of characters on their way to discovering a place that holds strong magic. They're on a ship or a boat sailing towards that place. And one day a main character finds the leader dead and realizes that she's been murdered. Alongside, there are also political struggles that our character have to deal with. First of all, I think this book went in direction I didn't expect it to. I was fine with that, didn't really mind it, of course. The vibes were cool, okay? The mythical creatures were really interesting and unique. It was interesting to read about their interactions with our characters. It was nice to read about the ways to deal with those mythical creatures. The world building seemed very confusing. The characters were fine, but they were kind of mediocre as well. The political tone of the story created some sort of a disconnect in my head, but I went along with that and I kept reading until I thought that I wasn't actually invested in what I was reading. So yeah, I just decided to DNF it because of that disconnection that I felt. I think there were also too many folklore tales. I think there were just too many of them. Like every other chapter, there would be a folklore tale thrown in, and I'd be just like, why do we have to learn everything through tales? I get it, this is a folklore story, but maybe not every other chapter. It didn't speak to me, unfortunately, so I was just not invested and decided to put it down. Next, I read A War of Wyverns, the sequel to A Language of Dragons, and when I finished A Language of Dragons, I thought this was going to be a duology because I think it was marketed as a duology, if I'm not wrong. There's definitely going to be a third book, and it already has a title. I don't remember the title, but it's planned for 2027. In The Language of Dragons, we follow a girl who is studying to become a dragon translator. She wants to learn and know and translate and use dragon languages until her parents become arrested. The society is also divided into classes, and there are some new laws about people and dragons and the ways they're allowed or not allowed to communicate with each other. So then she's offered a position at the governmental facility. Yeah, she does accept the offer because otherwise her parents won't be let out. And she's told to use her language skills to find out more about dragon languages and how people can understand them, how people can communicate with dragons, answer them, listen to them, and all of that. Her mission at the facility becomes an eye-opening experience for her because she discovers some terrifying truths about those dragon languages, how the government wants to use them and what it wants to use them for. That's our premise. I enjoyed the first book, but not nearly as much as I enjoyed this one. The only thing I struggled with was the writing style, and I think I just felt disconnected from it, and that's why I had to slow down a lot of times and reread a lot of things because, yeah, I really felt disconnected from the writing style. Everything else was perfect. One of the twists was a little predictable, but I think it still kind of caught me off guard. The characters were so cool and so nice and funny. One of the characters specifically was so hilarious. I didn't even remember him well from the first book, to be honest, but he grew on me. And yeah, I really like the characters. The banter was great. We were also introduced a new dragon-like species. And of course, I think the author did a great job at conveying that languages are not just for delivering thoughts. It's so much more and deeper than that. They're about spiritual and inner connections with others, legacy, influence, culture, and so many other things. This story overall really resonates with me in that way. I think a lot of people need to read this book because while it's very entertaining, fun, there are a lot of fantasy elements in this book. Obviously, it also explores very important themes. This book, this series overall, does a great job at showing these important things, and I think it delivers the point very well. I also liked the character development in this book, and I liked how our main character realized certain things, how they made her start looking at some things differently and acting differently as well. Yeah, I think there were also some really shocking and disturbing twists and turns, and the plot was fast moving. So this was a very satisfying read. The next book wasn't as satisfying, but it was a very anticipated read of mine, and that is The City and Its Uncertain Walls by Haruki Murakami. I'm still happy that I own this book, even though I didn't like it, because this is such a gorgeous edition, and I love Haruki Murakami. This is some sort of a sequel to Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. Both of these books are split into two settings, two worlds, I think. So one of the worlds is our real world, right? And the other world is this city with a wall around it. I was so excited to get into this because in Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, I really loved that city with a wall around it. I loved the concept and everything about that city, the overall idea. I really loved that book. Not only the city, but Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World is literally one of the best things I've read in my life. So I was really excited to get into this one because I wanted more of that city. I wanted another story set in that city. I got that. But this one was just so boring and so underwhelming compared to the original novel. It was pretty boring to read, like those, the same descriptions. But that's okay, because if you haven't read the original novel, you need to know what it's all about before the plot picks up. The thing is, the plot didn't pick up. I actually listened to the audiobook because I was so bored that I couldn't even make myself pick it back up and actually read it. So I listened to it, to most of this book. And if you haven't read either of these books, I'd recommend the original novel, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. I don't think this book is bad. Like, I do think that it can be quite enjoyable for some people, but yeah, for me it wasn't. I think if you want a more coherent plot, if you want a more fast-paced plot, if you want this perfect blend of realism and surrealism, then yeah, I definitely recommend the original novel to you. But if you don't want anything fast-paced, if you want something just really slow-moving but still with some magical realism, then maybe this book would be good. I personally would still recommend the original novel anyway, because I think it's just so much better than this one. Maybe I didn't enjoy it as much as I was expecting to because I read it after the original novel. I loved the ending, honestly, and it brought the rating up to 2.75. But it was still like below 3 stars for me, and the ending was good. The ending was the only thing I loved about this book, unfortunately. Yeah, there was The City and Its Uncertain Walls. And the last book I read in May was The Poppy War. This is a historical fantasy series based on the Sino-Japanese War. And here we follow a girl who escapes an unwanted marriage and enrolls in a war academy instead. I know, sounds weird, but trust me, this is good. She enrolls in this academy to become a soldier because their country on the verge of getting attacked again. And that's why, yeah, this academy is actively training new people. And there she meets a really weird teacher. And yeah, he wants to help her. He wants to teach her some things that most students and most people in this country in general don't consider serious and worth learning. I loved the philosophy behind her training, the emphasis on body control, the consequences following certain decisions in the fight, and the fight techniques overall. Loved how the book delved into this broad concept of meditation, our main character's state of mind, body, and spirit. I think the story provides so much insight and depth into the themes it explores, and the magic system revolves around shamanism. So those committed to it must use psychoactive drugs to connect with the gods, and that takes a much heavier toll than meets the eye. This book is just so deep, philosophical, fun at the same time, and it features a fantastic magic system. I'm not very attached to the characters yet, but honestly I haven't stopped thinking about this book since I finished it, and it was my last read. I'm currently reading a thriller, so I think after finishing it I may go into the next book. And those were all the books I read in May. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what your last read was or what you're currently reading, and I will see you in the next video.